to end the war in Syria are underway. UN mediator Lakhdar Brahimi is meeting with rivaling factions for a second day. This after planned face-to-face talks were scrapped. Well, for more on efforts to end the fighting and help those affected by the war, I'm joined now by UN Humanitarian Chief Valerie Amos, who joins us from the World Economic Forum in Davos. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Now, firstly, this Geneva II conference has gotten off to a rocky start. The regime is threatening to walk out, and there's little hope for major progress. But are there areas where you think some compromise can be found?
Well, the political talks were always going to be difficult. We knew that. Lakhdar Brahimi knows that, and he will make every effort to keep them on track. On the humanitarian side, we need all sides to take this extremely seriously. We've got millions of people inside the country who are in desperate need. I heard reports overnight of 1.5 million people in the Hasaka governorate. We've just been there for 4 days. People are in desperate need there. I think we can make a lot more progress on getting access and being able to get to the people across the country in Syria, whoever controls the territory, that need help.
How would you like to see this access be granted? Humanitarian corridors can be very difficult to enact during a time of war.
Well, in the absence of a ceasefire, and there doesn't seem to be much hope of that right now, I think we should do this on a local basis, community by community, area by area. Let's get those countries that have influence on the groups on the ground, including the government, to work with us to use that influence to secure those pauses so that we can get the aid in. People who want to leave can leave. We can get them health care should they need it. There are terrible reports of people not having enough to eat, of people being on the brink of running out of food. We have got to address this as a matter of urgency. We're doing a lot on the humanitarian side, but our focus right now is on what we are not able to do, because there are millions of people that we are still not able to reach.
This has been the concern, of course, for 3 years since fighting has gone on. Has there been any increase in access granted to aid workers since the UN's call earlier in October?
It's been very, very small, and I think that the international community should be ashamed of how little more we've been able to do since the Security Council passed that presidential statement in October. In Yarmouk, an area that's about 5 kilometers outside the center of Damascus, we've managed to get 50 food parcels in. There are thousands of people there that we need to get to. In Hasaka, that I mentioned, in the northeast of Syria, we need to deliver by road. We need convoys of aid coming in. Because of differences between the groups on the ground and the government, we've only been able to take stuff in by air. It is far, far too little. There's a great deal more that we can do if we have the political will behind us.
Has access to humanitarian aid and the denial of it been used as a weapon?
In my view, using siege of communities, blockading communities, this is being used as a weapon of war. Absolutely.
You mentioned...
War has its own logic. We all know that. Each side thinks that they can win. It's clear, I think, if you listen to the political discussions, that there is a feeling that they cannot. This can drag on for years and years while the political negotiations continue. Let's take action on the humanitarian front. Less than 2 years ago, when I first went to Syria, we were talking about 1 million people, and then we thought it was a lot, who were in need. Now it's more than 9 million people. That kind of growth we don't want to see when we're talking about people whose lives are threatened, whose communities have been destroyed by violence, where people have had to move more than once, or indeed have had to leave their country altogether because there's no more that they can do.
Now, you've been in contact with UN mediator Lektar Brahimi, and you do say that, of course, these negotiations can take a very long time. Then do you see anything concrete coming out of this round of talks that can improve directly the situation on the ground?
I think there are a number of things that could come out on the humanitarian side. Whether the parties have the courage to put their people first and come to those agreements on the humanitarian side, we'll have to see.
Let's talk a bit about the situation on the ground. You, of course, have visited the country numerous times now. You mentioned a ceasefire could be a way, of course, to help the people there affected by the fighting. But how much has rebel infighting affected access to areas?
We are seeing blockages that are coming from rebel infighting, as you have called it, but also there are groups on the ground that have made it very, very clear to us that they will not give us access. Our focus has got to be on the government and the areas that they control and the areas where they are continuing to blockade communities and also on those opposition groups that are blockading communities, negotiating with them for the access and getting these local humanitarian pauses or truces. We know that a political solution is ultimately what we need here, but we are 3 years in. People are continuing to suffer day in, day out, and without a political solution, we have to do our best on the humanitarian side, and that's what I and my colleagues are focusing on right now.
Okay, now tell us in which areas exactly are these besieged communities, and describe for us, if you will, then, the situation for the people caught in the communities.
Well, you've got places like Yarmouk, Muadamir, Al Ghouta. You have a couple of parts of Aleppo where you're seeing siege or blockade being used as a weapon of war, Adra. There are a number of communities, but there are also a lot of places which have just been very, very hard to get to. Principally because of security. We've got 2.5 million people in those areas, and as I mentioned, Hasaka, an area with 1.5 million people is but one example of that. People running out of food, not able to bring food in, people who are ill and requiring attention, not able to leave, people who need their medication, those medicines not being available, children not in school. The situation is terrible. People without work, no jobs for them. People fearful of their lives because the violence is continuing day in, day out. I was in Damascus just 10 days ago, and I spoke to people who had had to flee some of their communities, and the stories that they told were horrific.
Now, tell us, let's talk about the people outside of Syria, those who have fled the fighting. Does the UN want to see the international community take a more active role in handling refugees?
Well, I think we first of all have to thank those neighbouring countries that have received 2.3 million refugees and are continuing to keep their borders open. Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, other countries in North Africa, all doing their bit. We want to see other countries keeping their borders open too. And I know that my colleague, Antonio Guterres, who is the High Commissioner for Refugees, has been talking, for example, to countries in the European Union. And he says, and we all agree with him, we should not see people from Syria and other countries drowning, trying to get to countries in Europe. We have an international responsibility. We should recognise that and we should act on it.
Do you believe, is there the possibility then to have a UN resolution on for the situation in Syria in terms of humanitarian efforts there?
I hope that we will see the international community, particularly the members of the Security Council, coming together and making a decision on how we can best tackle this major humanitarian crisis. We have not seen that agreement on the political front. The countries all talk about their concerns on the humanitarian side. They have not been able to agree on a resolution on humanitarian issues. That's why we got what's called a presidential statement. It is not binding, as the Syrian government have made it very clear to me on more than one occasion. So they do not have to abide by what is in it. But if you look at that statement, it's extremely comprehensive. It covers the importance of protecting civilians, of making sure that schools and hospitals are not used for military purposes, the importance of getting into those communities which have been besieged for months. The presidential statement says all the right things. The difficulty is, how do we implement it? And the Security Council will hear from me in February when I will do yet another report, and they will have to make a decision about what more they can do to ensure that everything possible is being done to get humanitarian aid in to all the people who need it.
Valerie Amos, UN Humanitarian Chief, thank you very much for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
And live from Paris.